Well, you know. Oh, it's 12 o'clock. We should get started.
Sure.
So you can use the clicker if you want.
Yeah.
You want me to pass those out?
Yeah, probably. Okay. It's 12 o'clock, so we want to start on time because I know everybody's anxious to get to the airport. I just found out, just by looking on the TSA website, if you're concerned that the lines are 15 minutes or less. And that's always subject to change, but at least for now, it doesn't look like people are going to have to be stuck in 2 or 3 hour lines through the TSA. By way of introduction, my name is Fred Rooney, and I'm here to talk to you about incubators and how they started and where the movement is right at this point. John's also going to be presenting with me. And so before I start my presentation, I just wanted to get a sense from people in the room if anybody is from an institution that has an incubator. Okay, and if you are, do you mind just telling me where you're from and? Okay, good. You started about a year and a half?
Just gonna be
Oh, good. Brooklyn, yep. Anybody else? Excellent. Cal Western, yep. Very good. It's good to know that, people have a sense of what's going on. Does anybody really not have too much of an idea of what incubators are? Have you heard, you've heard about them? Obviously, you're here because maybe you're interested. All right, so everybody has somewhat of an idea. I'm just going to try to go through a fairly quick explanation of how it started, because it started in 2007, and so since that time, it's taken off almost like wildfire. I was accepted to CUNY in 1983. For those of you who know CUNY Law School, it was a brand-new law school in New York that was designed to provide an alternative approach to legal education using public service as the mission. And unlike Columbia and NYU and Fordham and New York Law, this was a brand-new idea. And in the first group of students, and it's continued on to the present, people were really interested in learning how to use law in the service of human needs. So I was really excited in 1983 to begin at CUNY. And when I got out of CUNY, I was really excited because I had a job. My job was at the Lehigh Valley Legal Services in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And, my parents are excited, and everybody's excited. I had my son was born in my last year of law school. So it was really wonderful to get out, to pass the bar. Or no, I hadn't passed the bar at that point, but they hired me. The difficulty was, if you look at the letter, my income was $16,500. So what that meant is that had I gone into legal services as a client to apply under the federal poverty guidelines, my family would have qualified. I always tell the story that I had an uncle who had been in Congress, and my father was, had lots of contacts in the Lehigh Valley, and they were pushing me to, get rid of this idea of public service, go to a law firm. And I said, look, I went to CUNY because I wanted to use my law and my license to practice law to serve people. I had worked as a social worker before law school, and so nobody could dissuade me from doing that. But as you can see, we were under the poverty level, and in order to be able to survive as a lawyer, I had to apply for things like the WIC program, subsidized fuel assistance for the winter, and subsidized daycare. Nobody could ever believe that a lawyer, first of all, would need public assistance, or number two, would have really the audacity to apply for it. But I figured, look, if this is what it's going to take for me to not have to go with a firm, I'm going to do it. And so I did, but I realized that after a year that it really wasn't fair to my family. It was really difficult. And so I had two options: go with a firm or go out on my own. And the firm was not an option, so really the only thing I could do was go out on my own. I went in to practice in Allentown with a friend of mine who had graduated from Antioch a year before I got out of CUNY. She had 2 years of experience as a law clerk, and I had a year under my belt at Legal Services. But has anyone started a solo or small firm practice? No? Okay. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, because in 1987, in Allentown, Pennsylvania, there was nobody there to help us. We realized very quickly that law school didn't teach us how to practice law. And so for the first couple of years, it was excruciatingly difficult to try to develop the skills that you needed. Number one, as a lawyer, your professional skills, and number two, as a small business owner, because a law practice is a business. And in order to be able to survive, in order to be able to be there for underserved communities, you had to be able to learn how to make it economically viable. In 13 years after I got out of CUNY, I received a notification that CUNY, University of Maryland, St. Mary's, and Northeastern had applied for funding from the Open Society Institute to try to figure out ways to support lawyers who, very much like myself, wanted to do what we thought was the right thing in our communities, but lacked the skills to be able to do it. So CUNY sent out a fax at the time, there were no emails, and they were looking for someone who had created a small firm practice in an underserved community. Spanish happens to be my second language, so in the Lehigh Valley, it was home to a very, very large Latino community. And so my practice was primarily focused on the Latino community in Allentown and Bethlehem because there were very few lawyers who had the skills to be able to deal with people who didn't speak English. So it was really ironic that 13 years later, law schools began to realize that there were lots of people like myself who really wanted to serve and serve in a meaningful way, but didn't have the skills to do that. And what the deans in all of these law schools found out was that so many of the graduates who attempted to go into private practice would go in for 6 months and then end up having to close up shop because they didn't have the skills to be able to maintain the practice. And so bad news was it was really difficult for me initially. The good news is that after 4 or 5 years, it became easier, and it actually became lucrative. I started with nothing, and then by the time I went back to CUNY 13 years later, I had 4 or 5 lawyers working for me in a very active practice in Bethlehem. So in 1997, again, these schools applied for funding. They got the funding, and the idea was to provide networks to support people who wanted to create solo or small firm practices. From 1998 to 2007, we did that, at least at CUNY, electronically after we got people to learn what email was and what the internet was. And then we forced them to have to come back every week or every 2 weeks to the law school to be able to develop their skills. We were there to help them. We were the senior partners and they were associates, but they were spread out over all the 5 boroughs. And they, you know, it was amazing to see lawyers so desperate to learn that they would come back after they graduated. Usually you would think that you'd say goodbye on graduation day and that would be the last time you'd want to see your alma mater, especially if it was located like CUNY was, which was in the remote part of Queens. Nonetheless, people came back. And it was really impressive to see how quickly they learned, how dedicated they were, and how together, working collaboratively, they were able to really develop their skills as practitioners and as business owners. That was a focus that we were really concentrating on. In the back of my mind, though, was, you know, we're making people travel all this distance to be able to learn. If we could somehow just do it under one roof, that in a lot of ways we could help people avoid developing the bad habits that are oftentimes really hard for lawyers to break. But we didn't have the money, we didn't have the ability to do that, and there was nothing like it anywhere. But in 2007, we received a capital grant from an elected official who was in the area where CUNY was located, and it was for $64,000, and someone told me that with capital money you could buy books and chairs and computers and things like that. And then I realized that this idea of trying to create a space where people could come and develop their practices in a more methodical way was a reality. 2007, we launched the first incubator for lawyers anywhere. And you know, I did an exhaustive research to find out if there was anything like it anywhere, and there wasn't. I mean, someone said to me an incubator, and I had no idea what an incubator was other than where you put the egg in the, you know, a bulb and then the chicken. But the more I heard about it, the more I realized that in New York City there were incubators for graphic designers. I even went to an incubator for bakers. And I figured, wow, if people in tech companies or graphic designers or bakers can have an incubator, why can't we have one for lawyers? And we did. So in 2007, we started the first incubator. We brought in 9 lawyers. And in my mind, this was a standalone program for 9 lawyers, period. But the New York Times reported on the first incubator. A year later, the economy collapsed. And the next thing, I started hearing from people in different parts of the country. The person who was most influential once we started the CUNY incubator is a woman by the name of Luz Herrera she's currently the associate dean at UCLA on her way to Texas A&M. She was working in San Diego, or in South LA, and she was doing something very much like an incubator. She read about the program in the New York Times, contacted me, and from that moment on, we started collaborating from the East Coast to the West Coast to try to create incubators. The 2 early incubators after CUNY were 2 that we started in San Diego, and Thomas Jefferson and Cal Western. And that was, way back, and we started trying to conceptualize them around 2012. The ABA was very helpful because when I was on the ABA Standing Committee on the Delivery of Legal Services, they were very interested in helping us promote incubators across the country. And if you're online and you put in Google ABA Standing and Incubator, you'll see a directory of incubators all over the country. This is just to give you a sense of how they started. These were incubators. CUNY started in 2007, Tulsa, UMKC, and then as time went on, more and more schools began to get on board. You can see, though, a lot of them started in and around 2014 and then continued on to 2015. My guess is, well, Elon is on as having started in October of 2015. Today, there are approximately 65 programs, domestic programs, incubator programs spread across the United States. And this map is always got to be updated because it seems that almost every week, every 2 weeks, there's another incubator that started somewhere around the country. State Bar of California was the first bar association to come up with the idea or to embrace the idea of trying to create incubators that were collaborative. It was something I had pushed from the very beginning, that if you're in a city and there are 3 or 4 law schools together, why not get together and try to create something? And nobody really wanted to even think about it because of the historic conflict between law schools located in the same geographic area. But the idea was you're not competing for incoming students, you're talking about graduates, so there's really no competition. California started 4 very interesting ones. One is in LA, and you can see that it's made up of different legal organizations, and Pepperdine, UCLA, and Southwestern. In Bali is one of the newest incubators in the country, and that's in the Bay Area. And you can see it's made up of a combination of law schools and bar associations and legal organizations. This is just to give you a sense of bar associations, local and state bar associations, that have embraced the idea of incubators. They're no longer programs that are started simply by a law school for their graduates. They're now, well, you can see they're spreading out all over the country. And 2 days ago, I visited the Georgia incubator, which is something that we've been working on for several years. It's incredibly exciting. It's a block from the Ritz-Carlton, and if people had time, it would be great to be able to see it. But as you look at it, you can see it's a State Bar of Georgia, the Supreme Court. All of these organizations and law schools have come together to create incubators. 2012, 2013, I was given a Fulbright award and my proposal was to see if the model that was very successful in the U.S. could be replicated outside of the U.S. And so I chose to see if that was a possibility by going to the Dominican Republic. And this is a picture of a group of people from the first incubator outside of the U.S. in Santo Domingo. We started in 2013. They now have, I think they're into their 4th cohort of lawyers who are part of the incubator. The young Dominican lawyers who were educated and trained in the Dominican incubator then became spokespersons on an international level for the whole idea of incubators. And so you can see, if you look at this picture, you're going to see 2 pictures. One is of the Dominican flag, and then the same young men in that picture next to, it's not the Taj Mahal, it's in India. They went and they talked to people at the Gage conference in 2013 about the value of incubators for them as Dominicans. And the Dominicans continue to be really in the forefront of helping to create an awareness of what incubators are outside of the U.S. And so in 2014, again, I was given a Fulbright Specialist Award and took the model to Pakistan. The question is, how do you create an incubator in Islamabad? Well, working collaboratively with people on the ground, we did. And we got funding from the U.S. government in 2015. We got a 2-year grant and we were talking about when you use State Department money for incubators and to train lawyers, it's a hell of a lot better than using it for drones. And so people in the countries where these programs are beginning to crop up are very glad that we're providing opportunities for their law graduates. We launched on April 15th, the first incubator in Asia, and this is some pictures of the folks, the young lawyers who were part of that program. Some international programs that are on the drawing board, you can see that the interest is, not only has it been enormous throughout the U.S., but it's now being embraced by people all over the world. John and I are going to talk a little bit more about specifics. I think that the idea was, I just wanted to give you a backdrop as to what incubators are, how did they start, and so we can talk about some of the specifics, and really glad to be here to answer questions that people may have.
All right. So what's the best way to do this? Here, I'll just bring up my questions.
Okay. Just want to put a plug in for Fulbright. For those of you in academia or who have any interest whatsoever in working internationally, Fulbright has a really wonderful way of being able to offer your skills and your expertise in countries all over the world. And so I know that they're interested in looking at people in the legal law and in legal education. So at some point, I'm going to pass out my cards so that if you have any questions in general about incubators or anything about Fulbright, if you don't mind, I'm just going to pass them in. Call me or email me about any questions you may have. But I would really encourage it because it's a great way for us to.
So you answered a lot of the preliminary questions there. I'm going to not bury the lead and go and do a little bit of this, and then go to the advanced questions right afterwards. So just give me I hope no more than a few minutes, 3 minutes there. So why am I up here with such a wonderful fellow who's done amazing work? And the short answer is there are many ways to succeed in life. One of them is to do good work yourself. The other is to attach yourself to successful people and ride their coattails. Or to have multiple successful people join together. I'll be a little modest there, right? So you know what's going on, right? We're in the middle of three big problems. The legal market is crashing, big law shrinking, the unsustainable model of the billable hour. We have a crisis in legal education, applications down, calcified models of instruction, and New York Times once a week coming out and bashing some law school on the head, and all of us collectively wincing at that, right? And we have the problem of the access to justice gap. 90% of the SRLs in family courts in New York are self-represented litigants. Modest means can't afford a lawyer. Even middle-class people can't. 50% of the eligible for legal aid cannot get help because there is insufficient funding. Fred talked about the incubators past and present with the ABA has been involved. They've been having their own conference. The most recent one was at UMKC in April. They call it the Access to Justice through Incubator Programs and Nonprofit Law Firms. So that's going to be a question I'm going to be asking. I love the egg with the justice coming out of it. You know, I'm sick of all the times I have to create a logo and I go look for my scales of justice. But I got to admit that's a new one. That's a good one. I came away from that thinking the incubator is the fourth year of law school, 3 years, 4 years, right? Or it's the legal intern year. It's like the doctors go to medical school and then they spend a year in hospitals treating real patients. So, and I've heard for years the idea that why don't lawyers practice for a year as part of their education? That's the way Canada does it with their articling year. Is that what it's called, right? It's the way Germany does it. They don't. I was just talking to a fellow from Germany. Sorry? The referendar, okay. That's the way a lot of the Europeans do it. They don't let you practice until they don't let you into the bar until you've had a year practicing at the elbow of a real lawyer or a real solicitor or barrister or something like that. And we take our chicks and kick them out of the nest and hope that they fly, except as we heard from our keynote speaker yesterday, only 64% of them do, assuming that they survive the nest, right? So why Cali? What's the connection here? I won't bury the lead. the incubators want to form a consortium, and they want to share content, they want to build tools, and they want to build their community to strengthen all of them, right? You can use your own imagination, but there's all sorts of things that a solo practitioner might find valuable to have available to them for free, I should add. Brief banks, practice guides, training materials, so on. Tools like A to J author, document assembly, tools for helping them do intake. The future of practice is an unbundled practice, and if we're going to link in technology, then maybe it's a virtual practice with virtual representation. Triage and consortia can do vendor liaison. In other words, is the word rate guy here? So word rate is too expensive for everybody who does practice as an incubator to serving modest means, but maybe we can cut a deal or something like that, right? And for the communities, videos, training, shared experiences, support. They showed some fantastic videos at the conference. I wish we had thought of that until, and played one or two of them. But we'll go on. With Fred doing the work that he's doing, there's a similarity of vision and goals across all of these incubators, which is a shared vision that you can leverage, right? Every bit of that content, every one of those tools and those communities, I gotta believe, would be interesting and valuable to legal education for for 3 Ls and maybe even 2 Ls, right? The law schools that want to create practice-ready lawyers could use the experience coming from this practice space in their teaching in law schools. So that makes an instant overlap, or that makes an overlap that even goes beyond the schools are standing these up themselves. All right, I think the future of incubators is very bright, and I'll even go so far as to say maybe they are the savior, maybe they are the life preserver of legal education. At least if you read from the New York Times, we're all going to be dead, all dying. So the thing with Cali is that if you saw my talk yesterday, even if you didn't, I threw this Venn diagram up that said law, practice, tech, access to justice, relevance to legal education. That's our sweet spot. We like to be where all 3 of those things are, and it turns out that's also a place where incubators want to be. And so there's a three-dimensional, there's a z-axis of possible overlap there. We can help you, you can help us, and everybody benefits from that. And that's sort of what what I'm saying. Certainly, we have a tool that might be valuable for incubators to build, and that might even overlap back into the legal aid space. We're trying at this moment in time to scale up our use of A to J author as a teaching tool. And I'm starting to think that, the law students with clinic experience, the law students with practice tech courses, the incubatees, they're a farm system for the major leagues, which is the law practice career. So they might go on and continue to be solo practitioners, or they might get hired by small firms or mid-sized firms or large firms, and this is a much smoother on-ramp for graduates. Well, that's what I would hope. So that's all I've got to say about that. I wrote down a whole bunch of questions to ask Fred, but before I even get there, I'm going to pause and say, do you have questions? The video?
Yeah.
Sure.
In their own words.
Generally a law school setting. Are those all what they subset of what they will actually get going?
Had a lot of luck leveraging products for incubator lawyers. So for example, any lawyer in an incubator in the US is entitled to free LexisNexis during the period of time. They have that, which is a huge tool, and it's a tremendous savings. PLI, Practicing Law Institute, they're entitled to access any CLE that was ever produced. They're entitled to live CLEs or taped CLEs. and the credits. So that's a really great learning tool for them. Leo, which is a law practice management, or my case. There are lots and lots of opportunities. With respect to law libraries in institutions, it really depends on how committed the institution is to allowing the services to be shared with incubator lawyers.
How do I look?
A lot of
Just
A lot of
making sure it's
organizations
working.
don't, or the incubators are not in the same building as a law library, but most of the time, the incubator lawyers are entitled to use the facilities and so. How do you figure out who to let in? Surprisingly, you would think that when new lawyers find out about incubators, that they'd rush to get in, especially if they don't get jobs in a large firm or in public service. It's not that easy, and so no one's really opening up the floodgates or trying to hold back the flood waters because.
Yeah.
Right, because it's hard for people to think about going into solo practice unless they've gone into law school with that in mind. And so there's a reluctancy, they're reluctant sometimes to make the commitment of getting in a program for a year to 18 months. We've learned over the years who are lawyers who are much more likely to do well in incubators than those who will not do well. And that's come about as, through trial and error. And so for me, the number one attribute is a demonstrated commitment to social justice. These are not nice clubs to bring in graduates who don't have opportunities. They're places where people develop their skills, but during that period of time, they're spending either a significant amount of time in pro bono work or low bono work. And so they've got to be into the idea of just not taking the benefits of this. And so some schools are surprised when there are very few people who apply, but as time goes on, more and more people are learning about it, and now there are more graduates to be able to talk about the value of it. I don't know if that's answered your question.
Is it fair to say, too, that if you're in an incubator program, you can take advantage of the loan repayment?
No, but we could talk about that when
Or
we
not
talk about
always,
the not for, no, I don't know.
Well, that's where my question about nonprofit law
Yeah,
firms comes.
yeah, that's there's a proliferation of not-for-profit law practices all over the country. And been a slow process because of the IRS regulations, but more and more firms are being created as not-for-profit law practices. And if someone gets involved in a not-for-profit, they are then able to cash in on the loan forgiveness after, 10 years? Mm-hmm. And so people have set them up specifically to do good work in their communities, but also to be able to benefit from loan forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. I remember talking with Chantel Argyle. She runs a nonprofit law firm in Utah, right?
Right.
I would never hire somebody right out of law school, but I would hire somebody right out of an incubator because they've got
Sure, they have some.
that year or 18 months of experience and get what we're about. Right?
Yeah. What you're going to see is a video that was produced by the ABA. The word went out to have people in incubators send very short videos of some of their members. And there were a list of questions that everybody was asked. And so there was no attempt to try to coordinate answers, but it's pretty amazing towards the end of the video. All over the country, you're going to see that there's a spread among incubators all over the country. Before we start, you have a question?
I just had a question about.
Yeah. It's a very interesting question, and I can say that the Dominican model, that I showed you pictures of the Dominican model, was a challenge to create because I couldn't find 10 lawyers, and I had a limited period of time through Fulbright to get it up and running, and so in desperation, I was introduced to 5, equivalent of 3L second semester 3L students, and they were really interested in coming on board. So we had 5 lawyers and 5 3Ls. And of all the incubators I've been involved in, it's the most exciting model because it provided the kind of opportunities for people where clinical legal education doesn't exist and won't exist for decades. It gave them an opportunity to cut their teeth side by side with lawyers. I think there's been a little bit of concern among clinicians in the US because I've only heard very few potential critiques or criticisms of incubators, but people are saying we have to watch out for them because, with the state of legal education and the finances of legal education, they could start eliminating clinics, and then they're gonna put people into incubators. I don't think it's gonna happen, but I think that you're right about the value of working collaboratively with the best. Really, some of the best lawyers in incubators are those who have come out of clinical programs all over the country, because they have some practical experience.
You do?
Sure.
This is worth it. You'll enjoy this.
How do I look?
I'm an incubator lawyer.
I am an incubator lawyer.
I'm an incubator lawyer.
I am an incubator lawyer.
I started out with the public defender's office.
I had about 10 years of work experience prior to going back to law school.
I come from the big law firm background.
I worked for a big firm.
When you're opening your own practice, everybody kind of operates at a different pace. There are people that dive in and take anything and figure they'll learn as they go, and then there are other people that try to specialize or move a little slower and a little more choosy about what they take.
The incubator is helping me start my own practice by teaching me what I want to do and what I don't want to do.
I'm a solo family law attorney.
I am running a solo immigration law practice.
My practice mostly focuses on small businesses.
I'm a DUI attorney.
I currently practice family law in Coral Gables, Florida.
I am currently practicing in the areas of construction law and contract law and some business law.
Specifically, I'm looking at the immigration issues as they come into play in the criminal system.
I'm starting a medical legal partnership with the at-risk surrounding areas. We call it health justice.
A practitioner who focuses on LGBT representation.
I currently practice disability law, mainly focusing on children.
Starting a nonprofit to work with other lawyers and advocates to help people with disabilities and many social issues.
Election law is also kind of a unique niche area of law. We file recounts, we file recall petitions, we make sure that voting is fair and that everyone has access to the vote.
We focus on helping people who fall in the justice gap between where traditional lawyers can help people through traditional means that have already been existing for a long time, and where legal aid organizations help people. So like low to moderate income people who don't qualify for legal aid, who need help.
Without the incubator, there's no way I could have pursued my dream of being a solo attorney and addressing the needs of those in the community.
We're doing a lot of pro bono, low bono work, helping people in disadvantaged communities.
The best resource that I think I've got from the incubator, my incubator, is the pro bono work that it set me up with.
I wanted to be in the incubator because I wanted to help people and have the opportunity to work with the community.
Because I wanted to help low-income clients.
Because I believe in providing legal representation to those in need.
My practice is different because of the way I bill. So a couple ways of doing that are flat fees and limited scope representation, where I can sort of hone in on what your big issue is, be able to address it without breaking the bank.
For me, I wanted to provide affordable help to real people. That means choosing to be able to work with clients that share my same settlement-minded approach to family disputes, as well as being able to charge flat fees that are based on results instead of hourly rates that are based on efforts.
I wanted to be in an incubator because it's always been my dream to work for myself and run my own practice.
I like running a business. I like doing the accounting. I like doing the marketing. I like meeting with clients, and I like also managing systems and putting systems into place.
There's the benefits of being your own boss, having the ability to, I don't have to wear a tie to work every day, and not having a boss pounding on my desk and yelling at me.
I started the incubator program and my practice with a 1-year business model and a 1-year plan. I've been in practice with the incubator for 6 months, and I've reached all the goals that were in that 1-year plan.
You're able to be very personal with the clients, able to ask them their problems, interview, investigate, and provide them a more comprehensive care.
Worst thing that's going to happen is I'm not going to get any clients. But I have lots of clients. I have 3 hearings this week. I have 2 hearings next week. I have a trial next week. So that hasn't been a problem.
Being in the incubator pilot program allows me the flexibility to raise my family.
I think this program offers such a great opportunity for people, in my position who are trying to, build a career around motherhood.
The most valuable lesson I've learned is that knowing the law and practicing the law are 2 very different things.
The incubator provides resources like speakers on specific topics like accounting and marketing, things I didn't learn in law school but are necessary to opening a law practice.
We've talked about ethical issues. We've talked about malpractice insurance. We've talked about IOLTA accounts. We've talked about different types of trainings. We've talked about client management systems.
How much time do we have? The list goes on and on.
Developing clients, retaining clients, billing clients, collecting on those bills for the matters that you represent the clients on.
I wanted to be in the incubator because I knew that it was going to take a village to make my practice successful.
We have numerous mentors that help us through everything we never learned in law school.
There aren't a whole lot of people who necessarily want to groom their competition, but there are a number of lawyers who are doing that for us.
We're working with some wonderful practitioners who are at the other end of their career, retired or trying to transition out of their practice.
Daily life here is much like any other office, except so much better.
If I had started my own firm, working on my own, in my own little office, sort of lose the opportunity to have a sense of camaraderie.
The camaraderie with the other people in the program.
A unique sense of camaraderie.
A feeling of camaraderie amongst all the other attorneys.
Camaraderie and the collaboration that takes place on a daily basis. Another thing that was extremely important to me was to be able to collaborate with other young lawyers.
The collegiality is probably the thing that I like the most about the incubator.
Throughout the day, people are in and out, sharing stories, sharing experiences, and sharing knowledge.
Manage my own time, but also have a lot of people around me, so it's not an isolating experience.
My favorite thing about being in the incubator is bouncing ideas off my colleagues.
Having a sounding board and somebody there that you can constantly bounce ideas off of.
Bounce ideas off of other people.
Having the ability to bounce ideas off of each other.
The guy across the hall is also struggling with things and going through the exact same things, learning how to build a business, learning how to retain clients, learning how to, the best way to procedurally do something, and then when you get stumped, it's not really a stump.
I have 10 other people who I can ask questions to and who I can sometimes help myself.
Plus we actually genuinely like each other, so it makes it fun to come to work.
What else?
Overall, my experience in the incubator, exciting, hard work, and worth it.
After credits?
No. And nobody was told to say bounce. When they collected all of these interviews, there were so many common themes that people were talking about in California, New York. I think you can get a sense of the diversity of lawyers. incubators all over the country. It's phenomenal to see how they've been able to develop. Questions? Are schools consider?
Like doing the videos, like how do you address
It's never been a problem to find people in any community willing to be able to help new lawyers. So I think everybody thought that it would be, that because of the competition, it would be hard to get people to step up and provide the kind of mentoring that new lawyers need. But the courts have been very supportive, and so they encourage lawyers in bar associations to get involved. Faculty members in law schools have been extremely valuable as well. And so then I get something like PLI, to be able to use the training materials that cost a significant amount of money, but at no cost to incubator lawyers is really helpful. It's a combination. There's really no set way of creating an incubator. There are some that go for a year. There are some that go for 18 months. There are some that serve 3 people. There are some that serve 30. And so what we're trying to do is, as John mentioned, is create a national consortium that, and hopefully through Kelly, that will enable us to provide more deliverables for organizations that are creating incubators, help. The great thing is it's like an open source in the best sense of the word, because whatever we have created, for example, at CUNY, the handbook that we created in 2007 has been sent all over the country, has been edited, has been redrafted, but there's a sharing, just as you can see among the incubator lawyers. That's the way it is with all of us who are in the movement, that if there's a grant proposal that's been used effectively in New York, it gets sent out all over the place. And so we're all very, very committed to working collaboratively as either the developers or the directors of incubators. John mentioned that the last conference was in April at UMKC. The one prior was at Cal Western, and the one before that was at Toro on Long Island. And they're very unusual conferences because ideologically we're all very much, those of us who are involved in this are completely committed. Our lives are really speak to our commitment to social justice. And so in many ways, it's somewhat analogous to the development of clinical education back in the 70s. You had people who were very committed to making significant change in legal education. They were looked upon a little bit as being on the fringe by institutions who thought it was treasonous to get away from the traditional model of teaching law. And so John mentioned that incubators are very much like the 4th year of law school. And they really, I think, embody everything that reports like the Carnegie report on legal education and the McCrate report back in what was in the 70s or 80s?
73, I think.
Yeah. I mean, all of these reports strongly urge law schools to consider the responsibility of providing ongoing and meaningful education to graduates. That in many ways it's unconscionable to see schools charging somebody $150,000 for 3 years of law school and then saying, we'll see you at alumni weekend with some CLEs and bagels. Carnegie, McCrate, they all the major reports on legal education said that they have to continue to educate. Lawyers must be educated in a meaningful way throughout their entire professional career. And so, as a CUNY grad, and then having gone back to CUNY, I think CUNY and Maryland really were the 2 law schools that took this idea and said, look, we have a responsibility to, we're going to do everything that we can in order to make them successful once they get out of law school. And it's not been easy. I mean, we're now talking of, since 1998, it's now less than 20 years later, but the concept of law schools taking on a responsibility is beginning to catch on. Yes, and yes, right? again, there's no cookie cutter model, and that each one is autonomous, each institution tries to develop what works best. But for the most part, for example, if in the video you saw Toro, I was at Toro. That was the last one that I was involved in directly in setting it up. When I got to Toro, I was offered a job unexpectedly. I came off of the Fulbright, never thinking I was going to work full-time, but I was offered a position at Toro. And I had a decent salary, but when the dean said it's time to start the incubator, I said, great, what's the budget? She looked at me, she said, there is no budget. That's for you to figure out. And I'm like, oh, right, well, we didn't have money, but we needed to get an incubator off the ground. We got furniture donated. So that took care of everything. Georgia, the Atlanta program, just got a suite of furniture donated. And so we had to be really resourceful in trying to figure out a way to fund the incubators. Cleveland Marshall, I don't think there's anyone here. Cleveland Marshall has an incubator. They spent over $1 million to equip it, they had to create a space within the institution, and they spent over $1 million to do it. I mean, we didn't have any money, so we spent $5,000 to get the furniture that was donated, hauled, disassembled, and then reassembled. So the Chicago Bar Foundation has an incubator for 30 lawyers. And they got a $400,000 grant from MacArthur, or I believe it was MacArthur.
Was it MacArthur?
No?
But it was the Bar Foundation and IOLTA.
No, they got one from a major, yeah.
All right.
You try to get funding as best you can. A lot of times the lawyers have to pay for their participation, and so that helps to underwrite the cost that law schools or organizations have in trying to get space. But then, with respect to how is it run, we hired somebody at 1/3 time. Rosemary was in the video. She came out of Skadden Arps and decided she wanted to go into practice. She had good experience as a lawyer, and when she went into the incubator, she agreed to take over the responsibility of creating training programs and dealing with the day-to-day operation. It was about $30,000, but for someone starting out of practice who was in the incubator and then was being paid, it was great. Some places have retired judges come in and do that. But some institutions spend $20,000, some spend $150,000. So it's all what an organization can sustain financially. There are very few incubators that have started and closed up. It's not like they're here today, gone tomorrow. But and so they're all finding ways to be able to sustain the ongoing services that they provide to.
So, go ahead.
Lawyers? Yes. Well, for example, Georgia, Atlanta, when I was there this week, they don't pay for the first 6 months. But from month 7 to 12, they pay $500.
A month?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then from 12 to 18 month, they pay $750. At CUNY, we started at $500 a month. People balked at it, and I said, look, you got to be able to think that with one power of attorney and a healthcare proxy or a will, you can make $500. You got to be able to understand that $500 for a space in Midtown Manhattan was not, it was a bargain. I find that if people balk at the idea of having to pay $200 or $300 for a fully equipped office space with, printers and internet and furniture and everything else, if they balk at having to pay $250, I really am very concerned about whether or not they're going to do well.
Sure, it's a test.
Yeah.
You didn't pass the test.
Right.
So this is the Conference for Law School Computing. What's the technology angle? I mean, I know I mentioned A to J, but
yes, thank you for.
What's the technology angle to Incubators?
Well, I passed out something that was just was disseminated by Legal.io. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. Legal.io. It was a program that was started out by lawyers in Stanford, and they've created a program that provides an amazing way of making referrals. And in an incubator, just like in clinical programs, the ability to refer cases to individuals is really important. And so up until recently, we've had no way of collecting any of the data on who's applied, to whom a case has been referred, what is the outcome of the case. And so Legal.io is being incorporated in incubators all over the country, and in bar associations all over the country, lawyer referral organizations all over the country, because it enables us to get all of the data that we need in order to be able to maybe seek funding from organizations or foundations. This is all brand new. And so it's sort of like, Uber in the sense that a call comes in or someone applies for get an attorney, to be able to speak with an attorney. And it's done electronically. The lawyer gets the referral electronically. And then it goes through the whole process of finding out from the beginning to the very end, what's the disposition of the case? Was the client represented? What was the outcome? It doesn't get into the specifics of the individual, but it's been great because it's really streamlining the process of having to have somebody answer the phone, write out the referral, and then try to call back to find out whatever happened to the case. So that's one thing. But as I mentioned, there are all people who also have the use of technology, whether it's LexisNexis or Clio. People familiar with Clio or MyCase as law office management software? Yeah. And I think that it's pretty obvious that incubators really need to do more to be able to get lawyers to a level of much greater, higher proficiency with technology. And that's one of the real benefits of aligning ourselves with Cali, that the opportunity to expand the use of technology in small firm practices is great. We oftentimes think of young lawyers as being really very savvy when it comes to technology, but they are when it comes to Facebook and Twitter and those kinds of things. But when it comes to the day-to-day use of technology to streamline their practices, they are not overly willing to embrace it
Sarah,
immediately.
can I get an amen?
Oh, amen.
Yeah.
Love from librarian there. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, because you get people coming in, I'm sure, and asking. But it's a new dawn in terms of technology, and for us, the challenge is to be able to incorporate technology and incubators in a way that helps to reduce the amount of time lawyers need to spend on cases so that they can ultimately reduce the cost of their services.
I was hoping to quit a little bit early so we have time to walk downstairs for the closing plenary. Any other comments, questions, ideas?
Thanks, everybody, for coming and listening.
Thanks, Fred, for your time. More room, plenary room.
What would the,
Good, and kill that.
nice to see you, Fred. How are you? You say hello to Caitlin. I haven't seen her for a long time. She's doing okay?
And like, okay, I'm wide awake now. I just wrote Steel Force. That's awesome. It's so great. It's so great.
That great. Yeah, so like, you just kind of get used to, you're like,